Do you ski? I did I need to know. Okay, do you ski? Okay, I just want to know if you ski. Because I really like skiing and I want to go skiing. Because skiing is awesome. I want to know if you're skiing. Just because there's no reason. It's a getting to know you question. Well, I want to know if you're going to go on the skiing trip. Church. That's going to be the follow-up question. And then the follow-up question after that is going to be your ski club at your school. So I kind of tell me and I'll give you back your Bible.
Okay, if you say the way that they are hearing me.
All right.
Go get your coat. You did not study, I know that. No, I did not study.
No card.
Take this over. How's everybody doing? You good to go? So you should have checked your name off on the iPad. Did you do that? Nope. Nope, you didn't. And if you need a Bible, there's Bibles in the closet. You can grab one of those. Did you? Yeah. What? Sure. One of those. So you should get that. And you should, in your packet, you should have chapter or lesson 4 up on Moses. So that would be something you could also have up. Big thank you tonight for our treats. We have Quinn Ossenheimer. Thank you for your treats. Sophia Jacobson, where are you? Where is she? Thank you for the treats. We have Casa Bartelt, where are you? Bartlett? What is it? Case and Bartlett. Get it right, Pastor Chris. Thank you for the treats. Owen Shar, where are you? Thank you for the treats. And Maddie Tucker, where are you?
Not here.
She's not here. We will thank her when she gets here. Next week, we are having a fellowship night. You guys know what that means? Fellowship night. What does it mean? Go ahead and tell me. Eric.
So, fellowship night is when you get together with your group and you decide what you want to do next week. So, go to the village, decide if you're flying, or just want to bring pizza or something. And basically, get to know your team. Or not people in your group.
Excellent. So it's a time where you really try to get to know each other a little bit better, all right? So ideas of what did the 8th graders do last year? What kind of things did you guys do in 7th grade? Nolan, what did you do? Do I need to move you? Are you going to be okay tonight? Good. Okay, we're not starting off great. So Nolan, what did you guys do last year for fellowship?
We stayed in and played Fortnite.
Okay, so they came here to the youth room and they played Fortnite. That's acceptable. I think you guys got pizza too, right? Yeah. What else did you guys do? You watched Elf? How was Elf? All right. So you watched Elf, and that was really good, right? And you went duck bowling? Mini bowling? I don't even know what that is.
Duck pin bowling? Go to Bowlaroo.
Duck pin bowling? I don't know what that is. Anybody else? What did you guys do? We're 8th graders. Yes.
We went to the village.
You went to the village? How was the village? It was good. It was cold?
Yeah, pretty cold.
So that was a cold night. What else did everybody do? What did you guys do? Ordered pizza? Did you eat the pizza? You ate the pizza? Was it good? All right. And board games? Excellent. So lots of good ideas. So the whole point is to get to know each other a little bit better. The whole point is to do something as a group. So it should be stuff that you kind of talk during. That's why movies aren't great, things like that. But tonight, you should figure that out together, what you're going to do, all right? So think about what would be a fun thing to do. Often people go to the village and get noodles or Chinese or Qdoba or whatever. You're welcome to come back here, but realize that if you do come back here, there's probably 4 or 5 other groups here, and you're probably all thinking, we'll use the TV. So then all 5 groups are trying to use the TV at the same time, and that's kind of hard. So think about, you can grab a space in the building here, but if you want to do that, but just realize you might have to share a little bit, and that's fine. It usually works out okay. So just so you're aware of that. Make sense? So you need to figure it out tonight. Got it? Adults, you should have gotten that email with names and addresses. I sent that out. So just so you have that for your group list. All right. And then after that, just because I won't be able to remind you next week, for treats, Brad Forrest. Where's Brad? You're bringing treats next week. And Terry, you're bringing treats not next week, the week after, the next time we meet. Elsa Bolland. Oh, man. I'm messing everybody up tonight, aren't I? All right, you are bringing treats in 2 weeks. And then, it looks like Lisa on here, by the way. Oh, interesting. Jackie Brown. She's not here. She'll be bringing treats, supposedly in 2 weeks. And Laura Peterson. What's that? Yeah, so she signed up. So you can bring it for her. We won't make her come to confirmation. All right? Okay. All right, quiz time. You guys ready for this? Oh, I should remind you a couple announcements. On Big Group Night, so next week we will not have WOW because it's a fellowship night, but the week after that we'll have WOW. I think where the rotation is up to Taco Bar next time. We had awesome sandwiches tonight. Great chance to come and hang out, do homework, and get ready. Also, a skip down to the very last one there. At that, right at kind of the middle of that WOW time is John's Choir. New generation choir, and I think they're actually, I said in the sanctuary, but tonight I think they were in the choir room. So, did anybody go to that? All of you went to it. So that was really great, and I think it's in the choir room. All right, so look for John there. I know they just got back, so I think he's just getting it ramped up. Youth events, we have a drama group coming up. That's not till the 13th of October. We have Green Teens, that's this weekend, this Sunday, so should be a lot of fun. So there will be lunch with that, so be aware of that. This Sunday at 12:15, and then we're also looking for a rock climbing event coming up late October, so those are a couple things going on. All right, quiz time. So we've had 3 lessons under our belt. The first lesson was all about what in the Bible? Yeah, creation. All right, you're next. So, and what book and chapter is the creation story in? What book?
The Bible?
Well, yes, the book of the Bible. Which book of the Bible? Do you remember the first book of the Bible? Oh. Yeah, Genesis. And guess which chapter it is, since it's like the very beginning. The first one, right? You ready? So, Genesis 1 is all about the creation story. Yes? What's your question? What's your answer? Oh, you've got the next one? So what if it's like super hard? Then he gets it, okay. All right, so the next question would be something like, let me think. How many books are in the Bible? 66. Oh, bad throw. Oh, good catch. Give it to him. Just because you catch it doesn't mean you get to keep it. There's 66. How many are in the Old Testament? 39. And how many are in the New Testament? 27. One easy way to remember that is 3 times 9. 39. 3 times 9 is 27. That's easy. Maybe. What was the Old Testament written in? What language was written in? Hebrew. And what was the New Testament written in? Greek. What did Martin Luther translate it into? German. All right.
If we don't get a sucker, you can't blame us for
I think of other things from that lesson that I really want you to have memorized. What's the word that talks about how we're supposed to take care of the earth? Yeah. Dominion. So it says we are to have dominion over the earth. That means the caretakers. All right? And after, it wasn't all the days, but we would say they all reflected this. God said what? Looked at what God had done and said what?
It was good.
It was good. And often it was very good. All right? So creation. Reflecting on that. Let's see. This is kind of a, we talked about it. What did God, in the second chapter of Genesis, God formed humankind out of what? Yes.
Clay.
Out of the dirt,
Oh,
or ashes,
yeah.
or clay. Out of one of those natural elements, right, you could say, and formed humankind, and we use that phrase at what service in Lent? You've already got one, right? So don't raise your hand. Ash Wednesday, do you remember what we say? That's the extra part of this. Yep. Perfect. From dust you came, into dust you shall return, right? So when you come up for Ash Wednesday, which you'll all do, we put ashes on your forehead, and the pastors say, from dust you have come, from dust you were created, to dust you shall return, something like that. I usually know it when I actually do it, so good enough. That's enough for lesson 1. Lesson 2 was about what? Do you remember? Yeah. Adam and Eve. And what did Adam and Eve? Whoa. Good, John's going, here we go. What did happen with Adam and Eve? They ate the apple that God told them not to eat, the apple of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Yes?
And they were blaming it on other things.
Who did they blame it on?
Like the serpent and Adam blamed it on
Excellent. So Eve blamed it on the serpent. The serpent tricked her and talked her into eating the forbidden fruit. And then Eve told Adam to eat it. And he followed along obediently. Yes?
I told her husband to eat it.
Exactly. So Eve told Adam to eat it, right? That was good. So, all that's going on. Then we say certain feelings came about. Do you remember the feelings? Yes? Eve felt naked. So just kind of a cold, right? I'm cold. Right? What else did she feel? Embarrassed, right? Embarrassment. What else? Shame, right? Whoa. Yes, Eric. Guilt. Any other feelings that they were feeling? Sad. Let's just start making up. It wasn't making it up. Yes? Confused? Okay, here we go. Let's see how many feelings we can come up with. Yes? Resent?
He only has like 10 suckers.
Those
You have 10 suckers?
you gave her
She brought them.
those don't count.
I did what?
Those don't count.
Which don't count?
She's got her own.
You got a sucker already?
No, she didn't. Yes.
She brought
Mad. They were mad. Okay, that's enough emotions. They felt all sorts of emotions that were not good. And we attribute those emotions, we say what happened there. It's kind of the church word. It's a 3-letter church word. Yes, Nolan?
I asked him it.
Yes.
A 3-letter church word.
Yeah. Sin.
Sin.
Sin. Right? Sin. Now, we gave a definition to the word sin. What happens when you sin? You separate yourself, you separate yourself from God, okay? So it's that separation from God when you sin. And so Adam and Eve sinned. What do we call that whole story? Do you remember? Yes, the fall, right? And give me, why would we call it the fall?
because the apple, no, because Adam and Eve sinned God and that's.
He's going for it. So Adam and Eve sinned, and we would say, Nolan, what do you want to say?
They fell off of God's like, what's it called?
Fell off of God's wagon?
What? It's your wagon, yeah.
No, it wasn't a wagon.
They fell off his, like, his love, maybe.
They fell off his love?
They fell off his love.
That's a weird book. You had to make it in a book. They fell off of God's love. How about something else? Keep going. Any other ideas? Hit it. They fell from grace. Love, grace, it's all the same thing, right? Come on. Right? They fell from grace. So they fell from, you could have
God
said,
versus X Christ's expense.
no, why didn't you put that on the test last year?
That's like one of the only things I got right.
You got it now. Which you know what, is more important to me that you still remember it. So that's good, I'm glad.
Well, here's maybe a piece of candy for remembering.
Does anybody have a piece of candy for Nolan?
Yeah.
Take mine.
Would you get another piece? Why, you want a different flavor? You're sitting next to the box. You can just swap them. Yeah, go ahead. Nobody else can because she's sitting. You can swap it too. When you sit next to me, you get to swap from the box. That's the value of being this group right here at this table. What? You can't swap it now, it's in your mouth. That just doesn't work. You can't have another one. All right, moving on. So, fall from grace, Adam and Eve sinned. We talked about sin. They were expelled from the, not wagon, but garden of Eden. Not the wagon of Eden, the garden of Eden, right? They were expelled from the garden, and they were then, from that point on, made to toil and work in the garden, greater earth, right? And pain entered in. We talked about that. So, moving on. Lesson 3, we talked about on Saturday morning. So, we got into 3 special people. Now, do you remember the names of those 3 special people?
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Oh my. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Say it with me. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. One more time. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right? Those 3 names are really important. In fact, they still get used now today when people say, I am an ancestor, or I carry the promise from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? My forefathers were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So all the Israelites still, the Jews today, still say, I am a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right? Those are the 3 forefathers that we talked about that the promise came through. God started the promise with Abraham. Now, do you remember his early name? And by the way, if you missed that class on Saturday morning, I made a mistake. I didn't post it right. I didn't get the volume right. I got it right tonight, I'm pretty sure. Those that are watching at home, hopefully it's perfect. So, but I did upload the camera because Mr. Wolters actually hit the record button, so I was able to get it, and I uploaded it. So if you missed the Saturday morning, you can go back and watch that. If you ever miss a lesson, you can just go watch the lesson online. Then, in order to prove that you watched the lesson, you hand me a page full of notes on what you watched, okay? And then I check you out. So, Saturday morning, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What was my original question?
What was his first name?
What was his first name? So if you have a sucker in your hand, especially your favorite flavor now, we don't raise your hand again. So what was his original name?
Abram.
Abram. My neighbor's name is Abram. That's kind of cool, huh? So, and what was his wife's original name? What? Not Rebecca. Nope. That was a different wife. That was her later name. What was the Sarai? Excellent. Got it. Sarai was her first name, and then God gave them this promise, and as a sign of the promise, their name changed. Right? Now, I didn't emphasize this too much on Saturday, but I really want to emphasize it now. When God said, I'm going to make you this promise, the promise is 2 things. I didn't talk about this too much Saturday night. This is where the quiz time helps us, because I can hit the things I missed. So, God said, I'm gonna give you this promise of 2 things. Anybody guess what the 2 things are? Did you already get a second?
No, I don't.
You never got one. All right, you get one now.
I know what it is.
What is it?
Descendants and land.
Descendants and land. Excellent. Now, what flavor do you like, since I never gave you the first one? You got sour apple, you got grape, you got cherry. Sour apple. See, everybody's got a different flavor they like.
That's sound.
That was not her head. Those that are at home. Did not sound like a chair. All right. Descendants, ancestors, and land. You will have descendants, children's upon children's children. And you will have land, the best land that there is. In the Middle East, the best land is in Canaan, which is kind of by the Sea of Galilee. It's this area that's lush and green. It's the only fresh water in the area. Sea of Galilee is the only fresh water in the area, and it comes from the River Jordan. It's perfect land for raising cattle and growing crops, and everything else is dry and barren, but around that area it's green. It looks a lot like Wisconsin. It's beautiful. So, but one of the things God said was, and I talked about this a little bit, when he talked about descendants, he said, look up into the sky. Count the stars if you even can. That's how many descendants you will have. Look at the seashore. Count the grains of sand. That's how many descendants you'll have, if you can even count them, which of course you can't, right? But he talks about you will have all these descendants. Why is that such a crazy thing for God to say? Why did Abraham hear it? And most of us would say, that is a crazy thing, Jackie. They were both like really, really old, like 35. No. They were really, really old, which was like how much? Like 100. Right? They were like 99 years old. Super old. And God, they had no children, and God says, you're gonna have children, and your children's children's children. You will have so many that'll be more than the seashore and the stars in the sky. All right, so that's a big thing. And then, what was their response when they heard this from God? What was both of them, Abraham and Sarah's response? Now, if you have a sucker that you just pull out of your mouth, don't raise your hand.
I don't want it for the sucker.
But that's not the point. I know you, and I'm glad you have the answer. That's awesome. Yes?
Didn't both of them laugh?
They both laughed. Grape or watermelon?
Grape.
Grape. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You look disappointed.
It's fine.
Oh, okay. All right, great. So, they both laughed. Now, the child's name becomes what? What is the child's name? Isaac.
Yeah.
And what does Isaac mean? Well, what does it mean? Laughter. Okay? So Isaac means laughter. Okay? So he gets named after what they say, what they did when they heard they were going to have a baby at 100 years old. Right? But of course they do have a baby. And Isaac grows up, and God, there's this really crazy story that I talked about where God tests Abraham. Do you remember the testing story?
Yes.
What happened in the testing story?
God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son.
Yes, God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. Did you get one already? No. Are you good with it? It's okay? I think he was 12. Oh, so the Bible says Abraham lived to like 165. So, now, I think what was Methuselah was like the oldest one in the Bible. I think it was like 300 or something. Now, here's the question for you. So, a friend of mine is named Pastor Elias Katoy. Do you guys remember Pastor Elias from Tanzania? He talks about his mom, and when you say, well, how old is your mom? He goes, like 100. And he goes, we really don't know, actually, because we don't know what the year she was born, but we all say, she's like 100. So, was it that kind of thing? Do they mark the years the same way in that day? You know, was it really 300? Did people really live longer? Maybe they did. Maybe they were cleaner eaters. I don't know. Is that a thing? But we don't really wrestle with the exact number. The point is they were old. Okay, super old. Old enough that they all went, this is crazy. Right? And they hadn't had a baby at that point. Yes?
My uncle said that before the flood, people could live up to like 900 years old because God wanted them to believe in him, but they didn't after a year, so he had the flood, and now the average death age is 80.
Okay. I don't know where he got that in the Bible, but that's an idea. So I'm not going to repeat it, but so that's one of those things. People see, the thing is, when you read stories like this, you kind of go, "What's going on here? Why did they live to so long?" And then you try to figure it out. Was it something like that, like you said? Was that a theory? And you come up with theories. I told you the story about there's a word in the Bible that nobody knows what it means. Did I tell you that one?
Yeah.
Selah. You know, and so you come up with theories. Well, what does it mean? And you try to give it your best guess. You do study on it. You try and figure it out. You put it next to all the context, and you try and scientifically try and figure it out. And sometimes you come up with a bunch of guesses that you really don't have an answer for. I think those are great questions to ask God when you get there. You know, when you finally get to heaven, you say, "Okay, I've really been wondering this my whole life long. What does a Selah mean?" And he'll go, "It means sit down." And you go, "Oh, okay." You know, so those are those great kind of questions. Why do people live so long back in the Bible? In the early, especially the earlier sections of the Bible. Later sections of the Bible, they don't live that long. So what's going on there? All right, might just be a different way of numbering. Who knows? But the point is, they're super old. Okay, that's the point. So, moving on. We've got, so the story was this testing of Abraham, and after waiting all this time to get a baby, and waiting for the promise to come through this baby, they have Isaac, and then God says, "Go and sacrifice him on an altar," which was very common in those days, but crazy nonetheless, right? And so Abraham, without any sort of resistance, goes and starts to go do this, and takes Isaac up to the place where they would sacrifice animals usually. That was a very common thing, to sacrifice sheep, goats, sometimes doves. If you really have a lot of money, you could sacrifice a cow. And so they were going to do this, and he's just about to kill Isaac, and an angel comes and says, "No, don't do this. You've been tested, and you've shown your faithfulness. You know, you're willing to go ahead and do this." Now, it's one of those stories that we look at in the Bible and go, "That's not a real nice story," right? That doesn't seem real nice. But it's the point of the story is to show his faithfulness, Abraham's faithfulness, okay? And so sometimes you try to look past what's going on and look at what the point is. The point is Abraham showing his faithfulness. So, anyways, moving on. Isaac grows up. Abraham dies. And now Isaac is carrying the promise on. God's got this promise that his people will come through Isaac, and this promise of God walking with the people will continue on. So Isaac has a few children. Anybody remember what the two children's names? Who does not have a sucker and wants to give this a try? The name of the two kids. All right, okay, we'll come back to you for the meeting. Names.
Jacob and Esau.
Jacob and Esau. Who was the first one?
Esau.
Esau was first. Jacob was second. Now, they were twins. Now, not identical twins. They were fraternal twins. But they were in the womb at the same time. But the first one out of the womb is the oldest. And the first one out of the womb is Esau. And the second one out is Jacob. So Esau is the oldest. And in that time, that day and age, the oldest got everything. Okay, they inherited everything. They got the birthright, they got the blessing, right? And so, they come out. Now, their names meant what?
Esau means hairy one and Jacob means ankle grabber.
All right, so Esau, he came out and it was all hairy. And so Esau literally means hairy one. Okay? And Jacob, and he came out holding Esau's heel, and that means ankle grabber is his name, but it also is another name for cheat, a cheat, someone who's a cheat. Okay? So these are their names. And they come out, and the story continues on. Jacob's a hunter, he's a wild guy, woolly mammoth kind of guy. And Jacob is a smooth-skinned, good-looking guy that stays at home and cooks and stays with his mom and, very more of a homebody. The story goes on. There's two stories about Jacob cheating his brother. The first one is Anybody remember the story? Who wants to quickly tell me it? Somebody that does not have a sucker want to try? Does everybody get a sucker? No. Most everybody? Okay, so tell me the story. If you, go ahead, tell me the story.
So Esau was out hunting, then he came back and he was like really hungry, and he asked Jacob to like make him some food, and Jacob said, "I'll do that if you sell me your birthright."
Your birthright, exactly. So he did, right? So he tricked him out of his birthright by, because he was so hungry. It's kind of like when you guys are at lunch, at the lunch table, and somebody has like the most delicious piece of cake you've ever seen, and you just rue on it. Cake? Is there somebody say cake? And you trade somebody for it, and they say, "Well, I'll trade you, but you owe me your Xbox then if I give you this cake." And you're like, "What do I need an Xbox for? I'm starving," right? And that's kind of what he said. So, so he sold him his birthright, and they say he cheated him out of his birthright. And then later on, as Isaac is about to die, he knows he's about to die, and he calls in Esau in order to bless him because he's the oldest. And he calls him in. He says, "Look, I'm gonna die, and so before I die, go and prepare my final meal for me, my favorite food. Go out and hunt some game like you do so well. Have your mom cook it for me, and then I will give you my blessing once I've enjoyed this wonderful last meal." Right? And so Esau leaves. But the mom, Rebecca, has heard Isaac talk about this. And Jacob and Esau are a little closer, and Rebecca and Jacob are closer, and Esau and Isaac are closer. There we go. They're closer. And so Rebecca wants Jacob to have the blessing. So she calls him in and she says, "We're going to cheat your brother." She doesn't say it that way, but she says, "Quickly, I'm going to make a meal for your father. You're going to go in and you're going to give it to him, and you're going to pretend to be your brother, and your father will give you the blessing and not give it to Esau." And so he goes, "Yeah, but my brother's hairy. Won't he know? Because he'll probably know I'm not hairy." He goes, "Well, I'll figure that out. You just get ready." And so she makes that his favorite meal, and she puts a coat on him it's made of probably like goat's hair or something. I think she killed I think it went that she killed the goat for the meal or the sheep for the meal or whatever, and took some of the skin and put it on his arms and on the back of his neck. And so when he went in, and he also wore Esau's clothes that smelled like his brother. So he went in and he said, "Hello, my father, I have your favorite meal." And he goes, "Who's that?" And he goes, "It's Esau, your oldest son." He goes, "Well, come near." And he feels his back of his neck, his arm. He goes, "Well, it feels like Esau, but it sounds like Jacob." And he goes, "Huh, okay, well, you got my favorite meal anyways, and let me enjoy that." And he gives him his blessing, and then Jacob leaves. And just as soon as Jacob's out the door, Esau comes in from the hunt. He goes, "I'm back, Dad. I'm here with your favorite food. I'm so excited to get your blessing." And Isaac the father, I gotta get my people straight. Isaac the father knows that he's already given his blessing away. He has no more blessing. And he says, "Who are you?" He goes, "Well, it's Esau, your oldest son." He goes, "Oh," and it says he starts to tremble violently, right? He knows that he's been tricked, and he's so upset. He goes, "Well, who was it that was just here, and I gave your blessing to that person?" And they realize Jacob has tricked him. And he says his anger was so much he was going to go kill his brother. So Jacob flees, gets out of there because he knows his brother, who's a good hunter, is going to kill him. And so then for many years he's on the run. He's getting away from his brother, and they both live separate lives. Then I think it's chapter 32, they come back together. After many years, they both built up their families, they both built up their wealth, and they both have all sorts of stuff, and so much so that they're both doing very well. But Jacob knows when he meets up with his brother, Esau's going to kill him. Probably still angry with him, he's still going to kill him. And so when he knows he's coming up to his brother, what does he do? Do you remember what he did? Somebody different, yeah.
He sends different, we'll say, clans of people to give him gifts and.
Right. He sends waves of gifts up to his brother. And each one is meant to bow real low and say, this is from your servant Jacob. So these waves of gifts and people and coming up, slaves and all sorts of stuff to him. And when the last wave of stuff is gone, he stays in a special place the night before he goes to meet up with him. And it's called the Ford at the Jabbok. It's a special place. I couldn't tell you where it is. But it's a special place, and that night, it says he wrestles with a man all night long. Do you remember what we talked about? Whenever the Bible says something weird like that, what does it usually mean? Do you remember what I told you? You had your hand up first. Yeah.
He's like fighting monsters.
Yes, but we say it's usually a, yeah.
It's an angel.
Usually it's an angel. It's kind of this weird language that happens. And so it means that he's been wrestling an angel all night long. And right before sun up, the angel says, let me go. And he says, no, I won't let you go until you bless me. And he hits his hip and puts his hip out of joint. And he still won't let him go. And so he blesses him. He says, okay, here's your blessing. You are no longer called Jacob. You are now called Israel, which means you have wrestled with God and prevailed. All right, so the meaning of Israel, the name Israel or Israelites, are ones that wrestle with God. All right? So the angel leaves. He starts to head towards Esau, and he's expecting to die. But Esau runs up and does what? Huge hug, right? Embraces him, and he's like, what's all this stuff about? What? What's all this silliness? And then they embrace and they're brothers again. Now, I briefly mentioned, and I'm going to briefly mention again, that he has how many sons? Jacob has how many sons? Anybody without a sucker want to answer? You've got it. Yeah. More than 3. More than 5. More than 10. What's a good church number? 12. He had 12 sons. All right. He had 12 sons. And we call them now, what's his name now? Israel. So we say these are the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? You'll hear that phrase even today. The 12 tribes of Israel. So the sons each become a tribe eventually. Okay? They keep getting numerous. And each one has a different emphasis. And they all go into different parts of the land of Israel now. But they all go in, when they eventually conquer it, they all go into different areas, and that becomes known as Judah and Levi and different areas. So there's 12 sons. There's a favorite son, though, of Jacob. Anybody remember the favorite son of Jacob? And it goes along with the movie in the Broadway show. Yeah. Joseph. And he had a what? A coat of many colors, right? Or a technicolor coat, you could almost say, right? So he had this coat. Now remember, this is the reason why the coat color is important. Is look around the room here. How many colors do we have in this room? We got a whole bunch of gray, but we've got a whole bunch of other color, right? I like black. So we're used to lots of colors. You can go to the store and you can buy just about any color you want, right? In that day and age, guess what color they had?
Red.
Gray. All right? Your clothes was pretty much, it was usually either brown or gray, right? There weren't a lot of colors. So to have a coat with tons of colors was like, whoa, super, super special. And when Jacob gave it to Joseph, do you think the other brothers thought that was a great thing? I mean, imagine if at your house, and don't say it out loud, but think of your favorite thing, the thing that you would like, you know your parents would never give you, but you wish you could. I mean, maybe like a Tesla or something like that, you know? And you know your parents would never, ever, ever give this to you, but if you got it, it would be like, whoa, right? And then suddenly they do. Do you think your siblings are like super jealous? And to have your dad say, you're my favorite, do you think they're jealous? Super jealous. So much so that they are so jealous that they devise a plan to kill him. the other 11 brothers devise a plan to kill him. And as they're about to kill him, they realize, well, hey, instead of killing him, we could sell him off and make some money. So they sell him off as a slave to Egypt, to a slave trader, and they make the money, and they think, well, we'll never see him again. But Joseph goes to Egypt, and he has a bunch of things happen, but the big thing you need to remember is that he is able to interpret dreams. It's this weird gift that when people have dreams, you guys have dreams, right? They're usually kind of weird. And sometimes people can get these dreams, and then someone will say, well, this is what your dream means. And the Pharaoh in Egypt has a bunch of dreams that are really strange. And Joseph has gotten known as somebody that can interpret dreams, even though he's a slave. And so Pharaoh says, come and interpret these dreams for me. And the dream is essentially that I think it's 7 cows start off, and they're fat and they're healthy and they're really good, and this is wonderful. But then 7 really skinny, malnourished cows come after them, I believe, and they eat the other cows. He's like, what does this mean? Keep having this dream. And Joseph says, well, it means we're going to have 7 years of really good crops. And it means you should store that away, because 7 years after that, the famine is going to come in, and it's going to devour those 7 good years worth of crops. So if you think about it now, if we store it all up, we'll be prepared for the last 7 years. And so Pharaoh goes, wow, you are awesome. In fact, you're so awesome, I'm going to make you in charge of this whole project. You're going to be one of my government officials. You're no longer a slave. You're my worker in the government. You're going to handle this whole thing, and exactly that happens. And everybody thinks Joseph is the best thing since multicolored coats. Yes, thank you. I was trying to go opposite bright, but that's good. I like that one. So he's now in charge. Guess who comes though when they're starving? Guess who comes to Egypt because they've heard there's food there? Guess who shows up?
The 11 brothers.
Yeah. The other brothers, the 11. And they show up with their families because they're starving, and they've heard there's food, and Joseph sees them come in, and he's like, what do I do about this? What kind of response could I have? I could have them locked up. I've got that kind of power. And instead, well, he does this little trick, it's weird. He puts a gold cup in one of the sacks of corn that he sends with him, and then has them arrested. But then he goes, it's me! Don't you get it? It's me! And then they're like, Joseph, we didn't know it was you! And he's like, you know what? I forgive you. Come and live in the castle with me. We'll live with Pharaoh. This will be great. And so they all move into Egypt. They're taken care of. They could have easily all died, but instead, God provides. That's a theme through all of this. God provides, and they are saved. Okay? So that's the whole point. Jacob's sons and all their families survive because God put Joseph in the right place. All right? Now, here's what I want you to know. That ends the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis closes with the story of Joseph. We're actually into our lesson now. It ends with the story of Joseph. 400 years take place, though, from the end of Genesis to the beginning of the second book, which is Exodus. And that's the book I was going to spend all my time on tonight. So, 400 years. Now, when they start off, they're welcomed in. The family's like, yeah, come on in. The Pharaoh's like, this is great. You know, Joseph is awesome. You guys should all come and bring your families, and you all live here happily. In 400 years, they keep having lots of babies and lots of descendants. And just like God said, you're going to have so many descendants, it's like stars in the sky. Pretty soon, after 400 years, guess what the Pharaoh, the Pharaoh's view of Joseph and his family have changed. No longer is he happy to have them there. Now, he's like, they're eating me out of house and home. Right? We got to do something about these Israelites, because if we don't, guess what? They're going to take over. They're going to rule us as Egyptians. So they've gotten so many people, they could easily take over, and now we'd be serving them. So what's the plan that the Pharaoh has to do something about this number problem. Yeah.
So like the youngest, peer rubber.
So Exodus starts off with a story of this genocide where Pharaoh says, I need to cut down the Israelite numbers. And so one of the best ways to do that is to get rid of all the babies, right? Especially the male babies, because males have,
Power.
no, they don't have power. They can procreate other babies, right, down the road. So if you get rid of the men babies, there won't be more babies coming up, supposedly. So he has all these babies thrown into the River Nile and killed, right? Now, there's one special baby that God has a plan for. What's this plan? Do you remember the plan? Yeah.
To let him live.
To let him live. And so what do they do to let him live? Yeah.
They sent him down the river and then the royals or the king and queen get him.
Right. So and the baby is Moses. Let's be clear about that. The baby is Moses. He's put into a basket of reeds, put into the river and floated. And the mother says, you know what? Pharaoh's house is right down the river. If I put him in the river right here, the water will take him right down to the house, and hopefully somebody will say, oh, what a cute baby, I should bring him in the house. And that's exactly what happens, right? And so Pharaoh's wife, I believe, or I think it's the wife, brings him into the house. And she also goes, this is one of those Israelite babies. I'm going to save it. Boy, I wish there was somebody that could feed this baby. And she goes, go find an Israelite mother that just lost its baby so it can nurse this baby. And they grabbed Moses' mother to come nurse the baby. That's part of the story too. So Moses survives. And we watched the movie at the retreat, right? Prince of Egypt, which is not completely accurate, but it does a pretty good job. And he grows up in the palace, as we would say according to the movie, as a prince of Egypt. So he's got all the rights and all the privilege of being in the castle. But later on, he starts to realize he's actually an Israelite. He's one of the ones that are just like the slaves. And he starts to listen to their cries, and he starts to hear about their pain. And he actually sees one of the slave masters whipping and hurting one of the Israelites so badly that he pushes him and kills him. And so now Moses is now a murderer. And because he knows he's going to go to jail, he runs away, right? Runs off into the desert. He ends up out in the desert meeting up with another group of Israelites. And they take him in, and he becomes a sheep herder with them, right? Ends up marrying a woman out there, and he's out there for a while. Now, something really strange happens one day as he's watching the sheep. Do you remember what happens? Somebody knew. Yeah? Yes. Did you get a sucker yet? No. No, you like apple, grape, watermelon.
Watermelon.
All right. So he's out going after one of the sheep, and he comes upon this bush. And the bush is burning, but it's not being consumed. It's not really burning. It's not hot. It's just some sort of weird burning dance. And he's like, what is that? And he goes over to it, and suddenly it starts to talk to him. And it's God talking to him out of this burning bush. And God starts to speak to him. And he says, well, who are you? And God's answer is really important for us. Because God says, I am. You know, who will I tell the people when I go to Israel, when I go to Egypt, who will I say sent me? And he says, I am sent you. Right? Now think about that name, I am. What is it telling us? I am. It's telling us God is always present. I am. I am always. I'm from the past, the present, and the future. God is always. I am. Always there. Now, I showed you the actual word in Hebrew, Yahweh. Now, in some ways, if you think about that word, it's representative of God's Spirit. It's representative of the breath of God. We talked about God's Spirit being the breath of God in creation, remember? Ruach. But you almost can hear it as you say it. Yahweh. It's like this breathing in and out. Yah. So it's this, almost this breath in and out. All right? Now, what's really also important about this is this name of God is so holy that you're not supposed to ever say it. And the people believed in that day and age, if you said it, you would die. So they came up with other names for God that you could say, but it was so precious, so holy, that you couldn't even speak it. Okay? Like Elohim and things like that. So, but God says, I am. Now, this is really important, and we need to remember this name for God, I am. Yahweh is good, but I am is even more important. Because later on when we get to Jesus, when they say, well, who are you? He says,
I am.
and they're like, he just said he's God. And everybody else, when we read it, goes, he just said I am. No, he's using the exact name that God used when Moses asked, who am I going to say? And that's what gets him killed. All right? That's blasphemy to say you are God. All right? And so Jesus uses that same language. So this I am name is really important. This is one of the central names for God that gets really driven home later. Okay? One kind of interesting story from the word Yahweh. Now, I'm not a German scholar. Do you speak German? I thought we had some German speakers here. Anyway, when you look at the word Yahweh, in Hebrew, there are no vowels. So they don't have A-E-I-O-U. They don't have vowels, they just have consonants. So it would actually be Y-H-W-H. There's no A and E. They put little dots and tittles above things to give how it should sound, right? So it's just actually 4 letters, Y-H-W-H. Now, when you translate that into a different language, you have to accommodate for the new language it's going into. So it's really interesting when it gets translated into German, Y becomes a J, right? Germans do that. And then J-H, the W becomes a V, and then H. J-H-V-H, which becomes Jehovah. Okay? So that's where we get the word Jehovah, which is kind of interesting. So Yahweh becomes Jehovah in German, which is really not the way it originally sounded, but because of the way Germans translate things and how they pronounce things, that's where we get the name Jehovah. So, little interesting tidbit there. What's really interesting about this story also is Moses, when God says, okay, Moses, I'm choosing you to go back to Egypt where you came from, and what will you say to the people? That's my quote there. What will they say to the people?
Let my people go.
You're going to go back to Pharaoh, and you're going to say, let my people go. Now Moses goes, but God, I mean, the only answer he really gives is, but God, do you know that I killed the guy back there? They're going to just throw me in jail. He goes, don't worry, I'm with you. I will be with you. But God, I'm not really good at speaking in front of people. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Go. But God, what am I going to say? I'm going to get back there and I'm going to say, God sent me. Hey, let him go. And he goes, don't worry about it. I'll be with you. Go do it. And he keeps having excuse after excuse after excuse. And God gets really angry. Finally, he's like, go. I'm telling you, I'll be with you. I'm handling this. This isn't about you. This is about me taking care of it. And that's an important lesson for all of us. Because everything good that happens through God, through us, is not about us. It's about what God does through us. So God says, just be obedient. Go and say this simple thing. Let my people go. That's all you got to do. I'll be there. I'll take care of it. And guess what? Pharaoh's not going to let him go. But I'll take care of it. All I want you to do is do this. So finally Moses goes and does it. And he gets there, and he says, I'm here on behalf of God, and God says, let my people go. Now, what do you think Pharaoh says? No. Why would I do that? These Israelites are great slaves. You see the stuff they're building for me? If they're not here, I gotta do this. I don't want to build this stuff. I'd rather have them be slaves. So no, I'm not gonna let the people go. So, in response to that, these are all chapters, by the way. Chapter 12 in Exodus has the story of the plagues. So he says, well, if you won't listen to God, if you won't let the people go, here's what's going to happen. We're going to have horrible things happen in Egypt. Horrible things. And each one, I'm going to come back to you, Pharaoh, and I'm going to say it again, let my people go. So he starts off, he says, let my people go. No, I'm not going to let them go. He says, okay, well, here's what's coming. It's a plague. And the plague is, and I don't remember the order, but it's like frogs everywhere. Imagine if there were frogs literally all over, inside your house, in your school, just everywhere, eating your food, just, defecating on everything, just terrible, horrible plagues. And each one, after every plague, Pharaoh goes, Moses, I changed my mind. Okay, you can go, you can take your people and get out, just get rid of this plague. And the plague goes away, and then Pharaoh goes, just kidding. You can't go. I'm not letting you go. I just wanted the plague to go away, right? It says after each one, his heart is hardened. His heart is hardened. There's actually a song that we sing in worship, often right before the pastor reads the gospel text. It says, Lord, let my heart be good soil. Remember that one? Lord, let my heart be good soil. Right? And it says, when my heart is hard, break the stone away. That kind of goes along with this hardening of the heart. And so 10 plagues go by, and they're like frogs everywhere, locusts everywhere that just infest everything. The animals all die. All their crops die. The sun goes black, and there's darkness for days. And they even have fire and brimstone falling from the sky, and all this horrible stuff, right? I want to say what? What was it? The water. The water turns to blood. Their fresh water turns to blood. All this horrible stuff. And 9 times, it continues on, 9 times. And each time Pharaoh goes, just kidding. And finally the last one, Moses goes, this is the last one, it's the 10th plague. He goes, I'm sorry, this is the last. Please, Pharaoh. And he says, if you don't do this, every firstborn child in this land will die. The angel of death will come into the land, and it will go to every house in the land at night. And any house that says, I believe in God, will mark above the doorpost, will take a sacrificed lamb's blood, and will put the blood above the doorpost. And that symbolizes that they believe in God, that they are people of faith. If the angel of death sees that at the doorpost, it will pass over that house. If it doesn't see the blood, it will go into the house, and that firstborn child will die. All right? So this horrible thing takes place through all of Egypt. Everyone who makes that statement and puts the lamb's blood, which are mostly the Israelites, right, survive. And then the next day, Pharaoh goes, get out. Get out now, and get out in a hurry, before I change my mind. And so suddenly they're like, we got to get out. So Pharaoh gives them permission to leave. They gather imagine if, like right now I said to you, the Canadians are coming, and they are angry, and we got to get out, right? And so you would just drop everything. You're not going to do that right now. You would drop everything, and you would grab your stuff, and probably the stuff that you knew you needed to survive for the next 6 months. What would that be? You probably wouldn't bring in stuff that is going to drag you down. It's going to be food. It's going to be, the stuff you really need. So they're quickly doing this. And some of the things they grab are food. They also make some quick bread. So they don't have time to let the bread rise and get real fluffy. So they make this really flat bread, pita bread, right? Just flat bread that they bring with. They grab their stuff and they quickly leave. Now after they get out into the desert, Pharaoh says, go get them. And he sends his army after the Israelites to go and kill them in the desert. right? And so as they're out in the desert, they come up to the Red Sea, and as they're at the Red Sea, they're kind of stuck because they've got the sea on one side, and they've got the army coming on the other side. And it says God goes to war for God's people. So it has this pillar of fire that comes in that blocks them, and then God says to Moses, take your staff and raise it up over the sea and place it in, and the sea parts. So suddenly it's like Lake Michigan parting, right? So that they can walk right through the middle of Lake Michigan over to the state of Michigan, right? Imagine doing that. And so the Red Sea parts. They're able to walk right through the middle of the sea and escape while God is doing battle with the Egyptians. And then as they're just about through, he lets the fire come down, and Pharaoh says, go get them, follow them in there and kill them. And so the whole Egyptian army follows them into the sea, and just as they're coming out of the sea, the waters come in and drown all the soldiers, right? And it says God essentially is going to war with Egypt, right, to save God's people. So this huge story of God saving the people in this Exodus story. Now, a couple things I also want you to know that happens after that. So they're free. They're now free, right? And they're really happy because God saved them. But they find themselves in this place that they don't know anything about. It's really a desert. There's not a lot of food. It's not a great place to live. And now they're like, well, we're free, but there's no food. What are we going to do? At least in Egypt we were eating. We don't have any food here. And it says, and so God says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to prove to you every single day that I'm going to take care of you. So every day, I'm going to send food to you, and it's going to be in this form of what's called manna, which is this flaky bread, and I'm going to put it all over the ground. So every morning, go out, and you'll see this manna from heaven, this bread from heaven that will be on the ground. You just go out and collect it. And I will feed you. I'll also send you some quail for meat. There'll be quail there that you'll collect, and if you hit this rock, there'll be water that'll come right out of the rock. I'll take care of you. I'm proving that I'm taking care of you every single day. And so they do this. And he says, now here's the trick though, because what are they not supposed to do on Saturday?
Work.
They're not supposed to work. Is collecting the bread work?
No.
Yes. They say it's collecting the bread is work, and they're not supposed to do work. So God says, okay, I got you covered. So on Saturday, you're not supposed to work. So on Friday, I'm going to give you a double helping of bread so that you've got the bread for Saturday too. But here's the trick. Don't hoard it. Don't collect too much. Because if you collect too much, anything that's left over is going to have maggots in it. And it's gonna go bad really quickly. So you hoarding it is actually going to be bad for you. So God says, I'm going to give you every day. Trust me, I will give you. Don't believe it, because people start going, well, I need to collect extra because I don't really know if I should trust God. And God says, no. If you do that, it's actually going to hurt you. So don't collect too much on the other days. But on the day you're not supposed to work, I'm going to give you double, and you can do 2 days on that day. And so that's how it works. God does these things and proves them for 40 years that he's taking care of them by literally providing food and manna and bread and water and quail out of nowhere. Okay? So, but the story is the people grumble, and they kind of grumble for 40 years. All right? So God keeps doing all these things, and they're like, yeah, but it's bread. I'm tired of bread. Right? And they grumble a lot. And God is constantly like, but I'm taking care of you. You were just about to die back in Egypt, and I took care. So it's this constant, what is the name for Israel? What does it mean? One who wrestles with God. The grumbling and the complaining is part of that wrestling, and it continues on. They're free, but they're wandering the desert for 40 years until they finally, and it says, partly because of the grumbling, partly because they went against God, they are meant to wander for 40 years until the last of that generation passes away. And once that finally happens, the new generation can enter into the promised land. So God says, nobody in this generation that was disobedient to me will continue on in the new generation, in the promised land, until they all pass away. And that includes Moses. Moses is not allowed to enter into the promised land. He goes up on a mountain and overlooks it. He looks down into it, but he can't go into it. So Joshua, Moses' helper, becomes the new leader who takes them in to the promised land. And they have to go in and take over. And we're going to talk about that next time. So this is a story of the Exodus and the story of Moses. And it's really God teaching the people how to be God's people, how to trust God, how to be God's people. He gives them the law, the 10 Commandments, talks about how do we live. And he's teaching them the whole time during that 40 years. Is that enough?
Yes.
Hey, oy vey.
Wait.
All right.
Oh,
All right. So wrap up your stuff.
My stuff is wrapped up.